Here at Snappy Tomato Pizza. You can give them a call at 588-SNAP. Coach, again, this is an enigma to me. You'll have to explain this to my brain, but statistically, when you win most of the statistical categories but not the game, how's that happen in football?
Yeah, it does. It happens quite often. I mean, two field goals, instead of touchdowns, and then 2 fourth downs where you're getting yards, but you don't convert on the fourth down and get a successful kick. And that's how it usually happens. The turnovers, we finally won a turnover margin.
Right.
That was great. Our defense got 2. We're real proud of that. And we only gave up 1, but it cost us a touchdown, on the 1 yard line. So, if you showed me those stats and said, how did this team lose? I would, I would be able to dissect that and say these are what must have happened.
And you do, you as you said, 66 plays, 514 yards to Southeast Missouri's 394 yards on 68 plays, and the turnover battle. I want to talk about a player who stepped up and made some big plays in this game. We haven't talked about him a lot on Skyhawk Talk. That's Tony Bell, who was probably the highest profile player going into the season when it came to media coverage. He'd switched positions a little bit. Tony had a big game, though. He had 11 tackles and 3.5 for loss.
Yeah, that statistically, that's the Tony Bell we're used to seeing. I think it's been a transition for him this year. I mean, last year he had he had Bobby Ellis and Ben Johnson in that linebacker core with him, guys that were always where they were supposed to be and ate up some blocks. It created some opportunities for Tony. We moved him back inside early this year. Wasn't quite as successful, and some of it was his doing, some of it was, other players, not executing their job up front, being the gaps they're supposed to be in, and he was trying to do too much instead of just doing what his linebacker position was supposed to do. And so we kind of moved him more out on the edge and let him play over the tight ends and over the tackles, and he's able to, he can use his eyes a little bit more there, as well as, his physicality and his speed, and the production starting to come back.
Coach, you make a great point that we forget about sometimes, and usually if you see a great player in any sport, they're surrounded by people who make them look good. Also, I mean, they complement each other. It matters, and you don't notice that.
Well, no doubt about it. And we tried to be as positive as we could going into the season defensively, but there's still reality of you lost 2 starting linebackers, an NFL defensive lineman, and 4 starters in the secondary. One of them being all conference in Snoop, and then Thad Williams had been all conference the year before. So we had a lot of guys to replace, and but hopefully we're getting better. We better get better in a hurry because the trip to Alabama, we're going to face a great team this week.
A little bit of adversity, losing the close games. That seems to be worse on the players and the coaches than anything. With that, you need players that step up and, from a leadership standpoint, stay positive. Who are they on this team?
Well, Tony's always one of those guys, and Charles Sweden, and no, we're in a good place as far as that's concerned. I've been very pleased with that. Like I said, you see guys in the locker room that because every game's different. Not everybody gets to play as many plays one game as you do the next. I mean, it depends on the tempo of the game. It depends on, did you make a mistake early and went back with the other guy, and that is. Is the team's got to be more important than your own individual goals, and so when you lose, that's still hard to do. I mean, it's a team sport, but with individual accomplishments.
Right.
And so, but I was pleased with that. I thought the guys hung in there together. I thought had good meetings today. We had practice tonight, and and I brought up the 2007 season to them. I brought up, you see, Eastern Illinois right now sitting there at 1-4. They've been to the playoffs the last 2 years. So, Michigan, what are they dealing with right now? I mean, there's a lot of teams in the country, and like I told them, guess what? Nobody feels sorry for us. Okay, we won our share of games over the year. People don't pick up the paper and say, what in the world's happened? What's going on? You can either waste your time trying to explain it, or you can go back to work and let's try to figure out a way to play better this week.
The flaw with football, though, is that every game is magnified because you don't play enough.
Right. Well, and I say, hey guys, we're all guilty of it, right? We read the newspaper, and whether it be last night the New Orleans Saints or who was it, Tampa Bay gives up 56 points or to the Atlanta Falcons, and they come back and beat the Pittsburgh Steelers this week.
Right.
So we're all guilty of it. That's why we love the sport and follow it, because it's such a there's not that many opportunities, and you have a week to prepare for it, and your last game, you're only as good as your last game.
You mentioned that. I would like your theory on that, because when you were growing up, I guess baseball was probably America's sport.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it probably was.
I mean, and now by far the biggest money-making sport, college, NFL, NFL.
Yeah.
It's all football.
Yeah,
Why do people love football so much?
You know what? I think it's the build up, like you alluded to earlier. The 7 days of preparation. There's 7 days for you and I to sit around the coffee shop and talk about it, or read it, online, read it in the newspaper. Then certainly the television analysts and telling us all what to expect and things. And then there's just, the baseball games are awesome, and I go and you can get up and go to the concession stand and get a hot dog and come back, and it's okay. Nothing wrong with that, right? But you don't feel like you really missed anything, from the football game, right? Because every play can change the outcome, and it's just more of a sense of urgency because there's you can't make up for that 0 for 3 the next day.
Right.
It's 7 more days to wait again, and I think that's the appeal to the American public.
For the stat geeks, the new thing for the NFL is fantasy football.
Yeah.
There's no way you have time to play fantasy football, but I guess you hear a lot of the football fans talking to you about it.
Yeah, I hear it all the time. I think Ty tried to get going with it, my oldest son, but I think that lasted 1 week. He didn't know how to trade his players around and stuff, and so he didn't win. So I think he dropped out.
I wonder what the NFL players think about that.
I wonder. I mean, can they play it? Is it legal for them to play it?
Yeah, because technically it's not gambling, which is pretty interesting to me.
Yeah.
But it will. I don't think you'll ever see fantasy football at a college. They don't have college fantasy football, do they? And never would because they're amateur athletes.
Now, who's your quarterback in your fantasy football?
I'm not in a fantasy league.
You're not?
I don't have time. I was. This is what always happens to me, and I play fantasy. I play baseball, basketball, and football. I always finish third or fourth. I never am first or second. I'm never last. I'm somewhere middle of the pack. And then I'll look back and go, you spent a lot of hours sitting around thinking about something to finish in third or fourth place.
That's how I feel right now today, sitting here. I spent a lot of hours
to finish third or fourth. Coach, let's look at the Ohio Valley Conference from this past weekend, and several games were going on. Eastern Illinois, outside of the conference, played at Ohio. They lose that one 34-19.
Yeah, I mean, put some numbers on the board. I think offensively, you'll know more about them the next few weeks as they get back into OVC play. They played Austin Peay and they're 1-0 there, but you'll know more about them once they kind of go through the gauntlet of the rest of our league.
At Northern Iowa, they went over Tennessee Tech 50-7.
That's Northern Iowa's good. I don't know. Tennessee Tech the week before holds Tennessee State to 10 points and loses 10-7. I think offensively they hadn't shown like they'd like to, and so it was. Did you see the special on ESPN on Watson Brown?
No, but John Abel was talking about that.
Pretty neat.
Because he has lost 200 career games. So you did see the special?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
it was neat.
Well, I tried to ask John this, and he couldn't eloquently explain it.
Yeah.
But it was a positive story about a man who's lost 200 games. So how did they spin that to make it up? And Watson. So how was that?
Yeah, well, actually, he was my quarterback coach, my position coach at Mississippi State. First of all, there's nobody in the history of college football that's ever been a head coach long enough to lose 200 games. Okay, so I mean, just to be able to be in charge of programs that long.
Sure.
Now, I think he's won 120, 130 something, maybe something like that.
And one tie. I looked up.
Is that what it is?
One tie.
Okay. And so, and I talked to Mac, talked to his brother and stuff, and he said, first of all, he's my big brother, so I always admire him. He goes, but he's done it the right way, and just for him to have an opportunity to coach, not only coach college football for 30 years, but to be a head coach. And and Coach Brown said it, I think pretty eloquently. He said, "Hey, I'm not proud of the number now." He said, "I'm a bad loser." He said, "But I am proud of the fact that I've had opportunities to be a head coach, to impact lives, and obviously." Programs think a lot of him, or he wouldn't have been in charge for this long.
What impresses me about that, and we talked about this during the broadcast some, is that in 30 years the game has changed a lot.
Yeah.
The players has changed a lot. As you get older, your separation in your age
Right.
and the player's age, and that's even changing for you, but I'm sure you can still relate because
Right.
you're not 60
Right.
or 65.
Yeah. He's 60, what did he say, 64 maybe?
Yeah, so he has to be an adaptable person to be able to adapt to the changes in all those facets of the game.
Yeah, no question. And I think as you get older, although you certainly develop more patience, all right, but then there's other things that you don't tolerate,
right?
That can eliminate some of those things as well. And so there's trade-offs with it. There's some things that sometimes when you need to pick a fight, and other times where it's just kids,
right?
And it'll work itself out on some things. So but it was pretty neat. It was good for the OVC. It was good. Just quick little tidbit on that. It showed him. I think he was 29 years old when he was a head coach. His first job was at Austin Peay, and then he went from there to Cincinnati to Rice to Vanderbilt, and so anyway, it's pretty neat. Then from there, a couple of assistants job in UAB, and then now Tech.
How old were you when you were here in '06? How old were you?
34.
34.
34. So he was 29 when he was in Austin Peay. So I guess
amazing.
He'll always be the youngest.
Yeah, I think there should be like the president. There's a law. You have to be over 30 to be a head football coach.
Exactly.
Tennessee State at home wins over Florida A&M 27-7.
You know, just defensively, look, I think they're first in the country in rush defense. I mean, they're just not giving up any yards at all. And you know, we've still, you look at the defenses we've got to play Jacksonville State this week, and then of course Mississippi State down in November. So we've still got 3 very tough defenses ahead of us.
And then Illinois State defeating Austin Peay 55-6.
You know, but they got the new stadium to recruit to, so I know they're fired up about it, and they're all over the state recruiting.
And then the other game that you've seen a lot is the Jacksonville State-Murray State game. Jacksonville State wins that one 52-28.
Yeah, I mean, it was 28-28 with about 2 minutes left in the half. You know, give Murray credit. They scratched and clawed and figured out a couple ways to score, and then, you know, they just couldn't slow Jacksonville State down. Jacksonville ended up having 600 and something yards total offense, and you know, just they're good. They're very good, and you know, you take their team last year who went 11 deep. You know, played 3 rounds in the playoffs, and then you add 3 SEC defensive linemen with what they had last year, and then they got you know, it's one of the better teams I've seen.
Wow. Okay, we'll talk more about them when we come back, plus our matchup with Jacksonville State on the Skyhawk Sports Network.